Christian parenting.
This is Chrys and Shellie, and you're listening to Rocking It Grand.
Join us each week as we talk about leading the next generation with faith, purpose, and vision. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Rocking It Grand. I'm here with my good friend Shellie Tomlinson, and we are here to talk to you today. What we love to do is just talk to you about raising our families and influencing those kids around us, and all that kind of stuff that goes along with raising kids, raising families. So today, Shelley's brought a topic that I really love. It's called the power of a pause, and just stop and think about that a second, because what we couldn't do when we were kids is hit a pause button on anything. I mean, really? We couldn't? Like the radio was going, remember? And
there was no
there's
pause,
nothing.
no
There's
rewind.
No rewind. There's nothing. It went and then it went. And so I actually use that pause button so often now, like late at night. I have a husband who walks 10,000 steps a day. So I'm throwing this topic out here. Now, if it's cold outside and as snowy as we had in January for us, which never happens, he will do those 10,000 steps in the bedroom at night while I'm trying to watch a few minutes of the news or whatever. And so often while he's walking those 10,000 steps, he'll also think of things that he wants to tell me that has happened in his day, which is great and awesome. So now I can just hit that pause button and let him share what he wants to share. And then he'll go on.
And you couldn't do that when we were growing up. You missed whatever was happening if you hit pause.
What I probably would have said back in those days was, honey, I'm trying to watch a show.
Right.
Right. So you have brought this topic to us about how important the pause button can be on different parts of our life.
Oh, and how important it is for us to learn to use it. Like you said, that it's there and it's available.
Right.
To realize that it's available. We opened the last show, Chrys. If I remember correctly, we just kind of did a little recap of the family situation that we are both in. So we talked about you and all your grandchildren, which are 14, 14. And my 6 grandchildren. And that can translate into a lot of noise and a lot of people talking to you, because our grandchildren love to talk to us, and that's wonderful. But what I have noticed is that they love to talk to us all at the same time.
Right.
Right?
You still have the littles around, and I remember those days. My littles, 12 of them are right at the same age, it seems like. They're not really. They're spread out. But I think when Avon was born, John Luke was 8. I think they're within 8 years. 12 of them. And so, yes, I was like that.
They all want to talk at the same
time.
time.
Something at the same time. And if you get them in the car going anywhere, it can be a complete chaotic
and you feel
nightmare.
like the traffic traffic cop trying to direct all the traffic. And for the parents and grandparents that are listening to us, I think of the young mom that's out there and she's got all the kids, and they're all talking to her. Just want to help her realize that to reach for that pause button and to recognize it's there, because not only do our kids and our grandkids talk to us and they want to talk to us all the time, but Chrys, they need to. They are developing life skills that are important. And so what we don't want to do is use the type of pause button that turns into just a stop. Just, okay, that's enough. I can't hear you.
And that's eventually what we get
That's
to.
what we do if we don't use the pause button.
It's like that show we had last year. It's like the pressure cooker. Eventually you're just like,
just
shut it off.
Escalates. But there's another way, and that is to learn to use the pause button so that you can stay engaged with your family and with your friends without having the overload. So here,
I like that.
The ones that I've brought to us today are a few that really work well for me. And before I get into them, I just had a thought. One reason why we don't want to not use the pause button, and I said that a double negative there, but one reason that we want to, Chrys, is because they want that attention. And if we do not learn how to moderate the conversation and calm things down hit pause and address things, they're going to get it negatively. And that's what happens by default.
Right.
We don't want that. We don't want the child acting out to get our attention because we didn't give it to them.
Right.
So,
and kids will do that.
They'll do that. So as the parent and the grandparent, we're the authority that says, no, I'm going to use the pause button so that I can keep the conversation going without going crazy
Which is
myself.
really like what I said about with my husband, Two Papa. The kids call him Two Papa. When I pause it, it's because I want to engage with him, too. So I'm able to pause this other thing.
See, it's
long
a win-win
enough for me to also let him know that I'm interested in what he has to say. So the pause button becomes very valuable.
Yeah.
It's a tool for good use.
It is for all of our relationships. Now, the first tip that I want to talk about in this is to pause for one-on-one time. And this is, for me, I want to talk, let's just address it with our grands. I have the in-town grands. I have 4 that live near me, and then I have 2 that are out of town. Now, for the in-town grands, what that looks like is that I have learned to invite them for one-on-one time. You know, they need that so much, that interaction where they're not having to compete with their siblings. And so I will take them out to lunch. They call it their lunch date with Keggy.
That's
and
right.
I will take them out. Now, the grandgirls are hilarious, Chris. They doll up for this. This is a deal for
That's
them.
so
You know,
fun.
they have their little cute little shoes on. So we go out to lunch, and then I take Weston, the boy child, and, you know, he doesn't doll up, but he's looking forward to his day.
Yeah.
And we have that time where we're out to eat, just the 2 of us. Now, in a family setting, when it's their parents and all the siblings around and they're wanting to talk to me at a restaurant, it's hard for them to do.
Right.
But if I take them out on a one-on-one basis, we can sit there and they have plenty of time without someone interrupting them to learn how to articulate their thoughts. For the grands that live in Houston, that's not really something that I can do. So what that looks like is meeting them at their school for lunch.
Right.
And sitting down with them, and they can kind of separate from their class, and we can have that lunch date. But it's looking for those opportunities, and it doesn't have to be a lunch date. You know, it can just be having them over at the house, but just giving that grandchild that one-on-one attention so that they don't feel like they're under pressure. Do you know how hard it is when you feel like you have 10 seconds to say something and then somebody's going to interrupt you?
That's right.
That's how our grandkids live. If we do not realize that they need that intention, they can't operate under that kind of pressure and learn people skills, learn how to talk, learn how to articulate, learn how to have a conversation. We can help them if we just give them that one-on-one time. For you, Chris, I wanted you to maybe talk to it from the parenting angle. What could that look like for a parent
I think that
can't, you know, go get the grandchild?
One of the best examples is my brother-in-law. When his kids were growing up, now they're married and have children, but when his kids were growing up, he took the son out on Tuesdays and the daughter out on Thursdays, morning breakfast every week. And they did that their whole 12 years of school. We did not start that with our kids because I was a teacher. I went to school with my kids.
Yeah.
So it was a different kind of thing. But I loved watching him walk that out with his kids year after year. And then after his kids were gone, he would take, somehow he and his wife got where they would take Sadie out. Sadie would go out to eat with them on Wednesday nights before church. And that's just such a special time for her now to still remember that she did that with her aunt and uncle.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be the parent or the grandparent. You might be the aunts and uncles. Like the other day, I texted my niece. She's a nurse practitioner. And I said, can I get your boys after school and take them to the mall to eat and then to a basketball game? Of course, she was delighted.
It was a plus for her, and it was a
can.
plus for the children.
For me, and then the kids, it was so fun for me because my sister picked them up for me and brought them to the mall, and they came running to the food court like they were running to Disney World, you know, and we were just going to Chick-fil-A. But that one on them knowing that I said, I want these 2 by themselves for an hour, and then we're going to go to a ball game, was huge for them in their life. So we can walk this out a whole lot of different ways just by being intentional. It's back to that intentional parenting and grandparenting and aunting or whatever we want to call it. The being intentional about the people in our lives and just thinking, okay, what can I do today or next week that will give a little bit of one-on-one time or maybe one-on-two. Sometimes you can I rarely would get one-on-one I had so many of them. But if I just had the girls or the boys or whatever, But
The
then
divide and conquer maybe
another
comes
thing
to
that I
mind.
did when mine were little, and you probably did this too, was before bed, I went in each one's bedroom.
Oh, absolutely.
Sat on the bed, did the prayers. How was your day? That was just a way to end every night. Of course, if you have a lot of kids, that makes it more difficult. But finding that time where you can just sit down and have that one-on-one time is hugely important.
I'm glad you mentioned that because the parents that are listening, we realize that what's on their plate, and many of them would say to us, well, I can't go get my child for lunch and have a one-on-one date. I mean, it's just not possible for me. And that is true. But what does apply is if you're at home where you can isolate that child, you can take that child. It doesn't have to be an hour long, but you can just an activity that they enjoy. For instance, when I'm in Houston with the Grands, Grant loves basketball. Well, when he's out of school, I can go outside and be with him a few moments where he wants to be, playing basketball, and then I can go inside and have some time with Connor. But just always being aware that one-on-one time just really gives them an opportunity to feel that, they matter, they're special, and what they have to say is important.
And this is something I learned too as a young mom. It really, if you will do that first, give them some attention, they really don't want you forever.
No, they don't.
Especially as they get older,
Oh, that's
but
good.
It's just like all they really want is a few minutes of being able to tell you something in their day or whatever. Then they're really good to go, and they should be. Kids, as the older our kids get, then we release them to go do and be and do other things. But I learned that as a young mom. I'm like, oh, wait, the minute we come in, if I just sit down and okay, what did you have? Where's your homework? Let's kind of go through everything. Then they were like, let me go.
That's
released me.
Right. I was going to speak to that later on, but we just come and we just chat. So you don't even know that's one of the points I was going to speak to. But I'm so glad you brought it up because, we get to talking and I may have forgotten. But I remember, Chrys, when I would drive up back in the day when my kids were in elementary school, and it seems like, forever ago, I was an interior decorator.
Yes, and that little bit of information.
Isn't that crazy?
I know.
I would come home and I'd pick the kids up from school and I would have clients that I needed to do this, and this with. I'd have all these big fabric books that I needed to take inside the house and try to coordinate this pillow and this drape and all of these materials. And the children were getting out of school and they were wanting to tell me about their day and they were wanting to go home and, kind of begin to relax and communicate with mom. And I found out really quickly that if I left all of that in the vehicle, everything in the car, all the notes, all the fabric books, and I walked in without anything on me, and I began to talk to them, and we chatted or whatever, they would go away.
Right.
Exactly like you're saying. They would want to talk to me for a little while, and then they wanted to get a snack, they wanted to go outside, they wanted to play, but they felt like they had, had that time with me.
Then you could go and
then
unload
I could go outside and unload the car and move on about my business. So I'm so glad you brought that one up. That's really important. Let's talk about this. Pausing the madness audibly. I can't tell you how old my grandchildren were or how when I figured this out. Not as soon as I should have is what I'm trying to say because I remember I thought, why didn't I do this sooner? Literally use your hands.
Yeah.
And of course, I use my hands a lot when I'm talking, and I notice you do too when we're sitting here doing the podcast.
We use our hands, when we're doing a podcast. That's
y'all wouldn't believe how much is going on over on the other side of this. But put your hand up, just like a traffic cop. So, for instance, Carlisle and Emerson and Weston are all trying to talk to me while we're out to eat or, we're at a family gathering. And I can't hear anyone. And it's so simple, really, but I would just put my hand up, just like a traffic cop, and the person that is speaking stops, the one that's being cut into stops, and the other children stop, and you can just say, okay, Emerson has the floor right now, but I'm going to, I want to hear what you have to say in just a second. But it was something like, why didn't I think of that sooner? So I just want to remind everybody, you have hands, lift them, give the traffic stop signal so that you can say, I want to hear you too. You are next. And then everybody will listen.
This reminds me of, I read this a couple of years ago, and it was such a good thing because when children, this is a little bit off of this topic, but we're just chatting. We're chatting, you guys, so hang with us here. Another time you have to have a pause button in your life is when you're carrying out a conversation with an adult and a kid comes in the room. Your children come in and they want to, tell you something. And I read the best hint that this mama did. She taught her children that when they came in that scenario and they had something to tell her, that they were to put their hand on her arm and she would touch them, acknowledging that they would be next. Mm-hmm. And I love that because it acknowledges to the child,
you are seen.
You're seen. I know you have something to say to me, but it teaches them, respect me that I'm having a conversation with an adult. But you're right there. And I thought that is such a perfect way to teach your children how to be patient and wait. I'm not sure how my mom did. I can't think back about that, but we never would have interrupted an adult.
Never.
My own children, the same way. And I may have done this unconsciously and have read this hint later. Maybe that's what they did for me. I'm sorry. I'm old. I'm so old. I can't remember exactly how I did that with my kids. But I think it would have been something like that because we taught our children to never interrupt when you're talking to an adult. And so I love this to teach them just to put their hand on you and you can put yours on theirs, acknowledging that they're there, but they're not to interrupt the conversation.
And I do not think that is off topic. I think it's exactly what we're talking about. Good. That pause is exactly what that we need to see and give them that skill. And I did do that with my children. When they would come in a conversation that I was in with an adult, they knew to let me know that they had something to say. We would communicate. I don't know that it was, by touching each other or anything like that. But I would give them eye contact to let them say that I see you.
Right.
I'm talking to Miss Rhonda, but I see you.
Yes.
And then bring them into the conversation because it gave them, again, that life skill that we're always talking about. We're wanting to teach our children how to communicate when they're outside of our homes.
I'm not sure if I held a finger up. Now I'm trying to think
maybe
back,
we held a finger up.
I know they didn't throw a shoe.
Yeah.
We couldn't do that.
Didn't do that.
It was something.
But this is what you don't see. And I notice a lot of times now, maybe in talking to young moms, that they're on the phone and they're talking to their children at the same time. And, I'm not throwing shade at them, but what I'm saying is they're not teaching that child to respect the parent that is speaking.
Yeah.
And it's important that they learn that because in your adult world, then they grow up and they're having communication with people. And if they don't know to pause and let that other person speak, I think about a line that you brought to my mind. If I quote it correctly, I read it once and it's always stuck with me. It says, it's okay to carry a conversation as long as you set it down every now and then. So we all know the person that carries on a conversation without breathing.
Without
and
a pause
all the oxygen is sucked out of the room and you can't speak. And even you and I could never do a podcast if we didn't pause and let the other one speak.
Again, you're teaching your children a life skill when you teach them how to pause because all of that involves those fruits of the Spirit like patience, kindness,
gentleness,
all of those things are
self-control.
All of that is what that pause button is all about, that you're teaching them, no, you need to wait just a minute for us to move on.
And it applies completely.
I love that.
And it applies to what we were talking about last episode with the discourse that's in our nation, because the pause button is going to help us in social media, on our different platforms, in our national conversation, when we talk about, things that come heated, a lot of heated discussion, if we learn to pause before we speak. And also, and this is what the pause button, I'm glad we kind of really circled around to this to end on, Chrys, but what that pause does, it is allows you to listen. And that's the problem with the lack of communication that we have that's creating all the turmoil, is that when you are only speaking, when you're listening, when someone's talking, and I apply this all the time, I'm always bringing myself back to this. I'm so glad we kind of circled around here. But when someone's talking, I will catch myself if I am waiting to say something. And I will tell myself that means I'm not listening to them.
Right.
Have you
I do
ever
the
heard of
same.
that? I
Yes.
do it. I
Yes.
say, if I am just waiting for a pause so that I can speak, then I'm not listening.
Obviously, I'm not listening.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I challenge myself to stop and listen to what that person is saying and then speak when it comes my turn.
That's right. You know what just hit me as I'm thinking this, and I don't want to keep referring back to the fact that I'm old, but we didn't even know this
She's
is
not
one of
that
those new
old.
terms, pause button. We
Right.
didn't have that term. So what we were taught is
Respect.
you need to wait a minute
Yeah.
and be respectful of the person that's talking. Those are the words that were used to us.
Right.
But now it's easy to communicate that to your kids. If you say those words, we're going to learn as a family to use the pause button in our life as we wait for other people and be respectful for other people. So, this is a new term that's introduced. But one thing as a parent and even as a grandparent, you need to always remember is you can always sit down with your family and say, we need to do something different. Like a new sheriff is in town. We've just got to do something different. Like maybe you've noticed your children are talking without that pause button. So then what you do as a family is you sit down and say, this is something I've noticed and I don't like how this looks in our family. So I want us all to work on this.
That's so good.
So let's talk about what a pause button does on a DVD player. Let's think about what it does if you're listening to some music and let the kids jump in there with that. And then you can just talk out and see the reasons we do that is because maybe we want to do something. We want to pay attention to something else for a few minutes. Let them, talk that out. But anyway, I'm just throwing this in here as a thing that anytime you see something going on in your family, don't think that you can't change it. You can't be something different. You can always change it. Kids are so flexible.
Powerful. I love those family meetings.
Yes.
Recognizing that when something comes up, you have a family meeting and discuss this is how we're acting and this is how we want to address it and some things that we want to do differently. That is so
because sometimes
good.
moms, we do get behind the things and things get out of control. That just happens. I can remember that as a young mom myself. When my kids were doing, I was like, wait a minute, how did we get to this point? We're going to sit down and regroup. And then we would have to sit down and regroup.
Oh, you speak for all of us. There are the things that we were going to do and the parents we were going to be. And I remember saying, I'm never going to scream at my children because I'd see other people raise their voices at their children. And I would think, I'm never going to raise my voice at my children. Well, I lowered it instead and it sounded like a growl, be still. So there are our intentions and then what we actually do. But having those family meetings, that's a great idea. I told someone the other day, I think it applies to what we're speaking about, Chrys. I said, and it was about someone that really we were wanting to help this person with the way they communicate because they do push people away from them because they don't breathe when they're speaking. And I said, if only she realized and we could all apply this. And so I'm not going to say she, I'm going to say myself. I'm going to apply it to Shellie. If I think that I'm always being interrupted. Someone's always interrupting me. Then the next thought needs to be, that must be because I'm not breathing and pausing.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I'm not giving them a chance to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's good.
And sometimes it's the quietest person that doesn't get the opportunity because they will continue to be quiet. And so if you are the one that carries on a conversation well, sometimes you might need to stop for a second and make sure the other person, that's where you need to pause yourself and let that other person that's quieter, just by nature, have a voice.
Service.
Yeah,
what a service
voice.
To that other person. I apply that to my husband and myself, which Phil is, I'm the loud, outgoing, rambling, talking person, and Phil is E.F. Hutton. When Phil speaks, everybody listens because he always comes up with something really wise because he's not a talker. He's a quieter man. But one thing that I've done throughout our married life is that I recognize that I'm louder and I talk more than he does. And so what I do, because I deeply love the man, is when we're in a setting, you'll notice that I'm going to stop and I'm going to address Phil.
Yeah.
and with whatever I'm saying, because it's my way of bringing him into the conversation. Not that he needs it. He's perfectly fine sitting there because, again, he doesn't have the need to just run his mouth the way his wife does. But I like to show him that respect by addressing him. And we can all do that for the people in our circles that have a harder time or not as quick to speak, I would say. We can just stop and bring them into the conversation.
Right. Absolutely. I love that. Okay, great topic today. Wow, go back and think about that with your family, with your life. I mean, have you used the pause button lately, not just on your words, but on your actions too? Is it time to just pause this while something else happens for a little bit? So great topic. We hope that you've gained something from it. We'll be back next week. Look forward to our time together. Shellie and I always enjoy just getting together with us. And then we're happy that we get to share it with you guys.
We'll be here next week. Come join us.